If you lost out on 6 or 7 leases, don't blame it on the fact that the rental market is stupid hot or whatever. Something is wrong there. Either your paperwork, your credit, your job, you, or your realtor. Something's wrong. All right. Hello. Welcome to episode 141 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Ariel Kormendy. He's Adrian Trott. Today, we're talking about bidding wars in leases.
Very competitive market.
Leases.
It has been for a very long time.
Multiple offers and bidding wars in leases. There's been a few articles published. There's been lots of noise in the real estate industry about leasing and about how competitive the market has been and continues to be. So that's what we're talking about today. If you're thinking about leasing a home, or if you're in a current lease and might have to move, or if you're thinking of investing in a property, you might want to listen on. Listen in.
You know what I find interesting?
On,
sometimes whatever. I'll see in, especially local Facebook pages. So for us, we live in Milton. There's Milton Talks. It's a large group. I don't know how many people are on there, into the tens of thousands, I think. But occasionally you'll see posts in there, but real estate related stuff. And it's not uncommon where I'll see a post saying, looking for a rental, 2-3 bedroom house, not interested in speaking with real estate agents. And people must have this crazy perception of what realtors are, or they've had a terrible experience. Because when you're renting, especially, and this is referring specific to posts talking about renting, it's advantageous to have somebody that knows what they're doing on your side.
If you can find somebody.
Well, that's the other challenge, is a lot of realtors won't step up to the plate to help with these smaller tasks.
I think that's the challenge. And I don't know what the public perception is in terms of how a realtor gets compensated in a lease. I mean, let's face it. If you're a realtor and you're a top producing realtor, or let me backtrack. It's hard to find a top producing realtor to help you find a lease if you don't already have a pre-existing relationship with that realtor. So if you're new to the market, you're looking for help, it's tough. Realtors lose money on leases. That's, at the end of the day, yes, a realtor will make a commission, but factoring in expenses and franchise fees and gas, even time aside, if you don't factor in your time, realtors lose money on leases, and they're a pain in the butt. It's a lot of paperwork.
Well, depending on the client, it can be extremely challenging.
Sure. And depending on, what the landlord's needs are in terms of contractual obligations. So, and you've got your agreement to lease, plus now you have the Ontario standard lease. You've got any schedules that are attached to it. You have to confirm all the utilities have been transferred, that there's insurance on the property. So there's actually a lot of steps that are involved from a realtor perspective. So I don't know what the public perception might be. They don't want to bother a realtor with that kind of work, or they don't want to pay to have somebody help, or they think they can strike a better deal. Right? If there's no realtor involved, they think, well, the landlord will save 1 month rent in commission or whatever the commission is. And, I can strike a better deal. But it's been, we see it time and time again. It's if you are just an individual approaching that landlord, it's really tough to put a deal together without a realtor. It's
absolutely
tough. And as a landlord, unless you have a dozen properties and you've been through that quote unquote rodeo many, many times, and even then, maybe you don't know, but the ins and outs right now of properly protecting all parties and making sure you're getting a good tenant.
I think that's the biggest part of it, because the Residential Tenancy Act supersedes the vast majority of things in offers. So from being protected perspective, tenants are covered there, not so much landlords. Ontario favors tenants.
Correct.
And that's why it's even more important from a landlord perspective to have, if they don't have proper representation, to really know what they're doing, and to like you, for some reason, or maybe you're just more thorough and catch more of them, but you seem to catch a lot of fraudulent applications.
And I had one recently that I shared with the team.
Yeah,
where the Equifax report was so blatantly doctored.
Yeah, that's right.
That every single person on the team picked up that it was a fake, but every single person picked up something different.
Right.
Like Steve Bruman pointed out a few things to me that, I didn't look at it very closely, because once I realized that it was a fake, that it was a forgery, that, I just thanks, but no thanks. But everybody picked up something, and pretty much on all pages of that report, there was something that was forged, something that was altered. And a lot of people don't recognize it's super easy to go out into the marketplace online and have fake documents.
Well, I know someone personally
purchased.
whose real estate agent handled all that for her. She paid, I don't know how much she paid. I think it was like $500 or something like that. And her real estate agent prepared all of the fake documents, or had somebody do it for her. Like it's unbelievable.
And you wonder why people have negative connotation associated with realtors. It was like the guy on, was it on TikTok, that commented on one of your TikToks? By the way, if you don't follow us on TikTok, we're really pumping out some good stuff on there, thanks to Adrian and Ian primarily. So it's at Kormendy Trott on TikTok as well. I think he said, and you commented too. You replied with a post, but the comment was, realtors are as sleazy as car salesmen.
Yeah, I love that comment.
Yeah.
Specifically for those listening, because Ariel and I are both ex-car salesmen in our previous career, among other positions in the industry, but it hit home and I thought it was funny.
Well, and obviously the two of us were probably two of the most professional car salespeople you'll ever meet.
Questionable. But yeah. Questionable. But it's interesting, because the thing that I'm very receptive of with all those comments is there's a lot of people that do not like real estate agents.
So there's a lot of people that don't like car salesmen either.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see that.
You in the last 11 years of being out of the business, you absolutely hate shopping for a car now.
Well, right? For me, it wouldn't boil down to the same context of being sleazy as much as it is just a lack of professionalism and just uselessness. Like, nobody follows up, nobody knows their product. It's very different. But yeah, it's an industry that I've not yet found somebody that I am particularly fond of.
But if you want to peg any industry or profession as being sleazy, generally speaking, car salesmen are ranked right up there in terms of sleaziness, or being disrespected by consumers in general, whatever.
I think on the grand macro scale, it's salesmen, salespeople, saleswomen, salesmen, whatever.
But let me just say this. You're trying to tell me there aren't any shady lawyers? You're trying to tell me there aren't any shady plumbers?
Well, actually, I see those posts all the time.
Yeah.
I can't remember
how
which
many
TV
contractors
show it is.
start a job, collect the money, and then don't show up to finish the job.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
They exist everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
There's lots of scrupulous activity in any business. If
Well,
you
the nice thing
look far
now,
enough, even in like restaurants, I've heard
yeah,
of stories in restaurants, reserving leftover food and,
just
come on,
go.
how far do you want to?
If people had the opportunity to go in the kitchen, 90% of the places they eat at, they probably wouldn't eat at. I remember when I was helping someone buy a restaurant, and it was absolutely disgusting.
Yep.
So
yeah,
that in itself.
I've worked in a lot of restaurants where you absolutely notice the difference between working in a top-notch, well cared for restaurant versus, one that's quote unquote shady or slimy, as that TikTok follower put it.
Yeah. But the nice thing now is I think it was more of an issue before, and I think it's still, I don't think people have really adapted to doing this, but I do this, and Gary Vee talked about it the other day, is when he's picking a professional to hire to perform a particular service, he goes to social. And I think that's really, that's something that never existed before, but now it gives you like insight into exactly who that person is, what type of business they're running, are they reputable? You can avoid a lot of those problems by doing your searches that way.
Well, those are real-time live reviews, right? Like even reviews, man. You go on to Fiverr as an example, and if you're just, let's say you're a plumber, and I don't know why I'm picking on plumbers, choose whatever, a painter or whatever, and you're just starting your business, you take $100, you hop onto Fiverr, you'll get a nice looking website, and you'll get as many people as you want leaving you Facebook and Google reviews, 5-star reviews, and you're paying them $5 to $10 to do it.
Remember there was a real estate brokerage, I think it was Comfree, before they got bought out.
Don't say names. Don't say names.
They don't exist anymore. And they were
I don't want to pay any more fines.
It's a news article. They were caught for persuading their employees, paying their employees to leave good reviews. So
that actually drives me nuts that we film this podcast every week. We're 141 episodes in, and I truly feel like and I'm sure you feel that way too. I truly feel like I can't speak my mind at 100%. Like I'm always at 70% and holding back 30%. And it's that 30% that everybody wants to hear, but I can't say it because my license and the code of ethics depends on it.
I think we need
maybe
to break down that barrier and see what happens.
I think episode 142, we should talk about the client that didn't hire us because we were swearing in one of our podcasts.
Yes.
People like that juicy gossip stuff. Anyways, we're talking here about a whole bunch of stuff when the topic is multiple offers, bidding wars on leases. It's happening throughout the GTA, not so much on condos. Condos are the exception right now. It's more single family homes, townhomes, semi-detached homes, and fully detached homes. There's a huge lack of supply right now for those types of homes. And when they come on the market and they look good and they're priced right, they're getting tons of interest and multiple offers. And a couple of articles over the last few weeks talking about people losing out on 4, 5, 6 different properties and going up against 4, 5, 6 different offers. Craziness. Got to be frustrating. Got to be frustrating for
It's harder to rent than it is to buy.
Yep.
Because it's no longer just about the amount. Like you could offer a few $100s over the listed rent price. It really doesn't hold a whole lot of value in the grand scheme of whether or not you get to list the property, because there's much more that goes into it, because the landlord wants to do their due diligence and make sure they're getting a quality person that will actually pay that money and take care of their investment. So money is one part, but it's not the be all end all.
So the first question would be, why is this happening?
Well, you said it, lack of inventory, specifically with anything but condos. Although even condos are competitive at times. It was interesting. I read an article recently in the Canadian Real Estate magazine about in Brampton, they're building their first purpose-built rental, which is I think it's something like a 20-story building, and there's also some stacked townhouses at the same vicinity. And it's the first purpose-built structure in Brampton in 17 years.
Wow.
Like nobody's building rentals, like purpose-built rentals. And in Ontario, I think that's predominantly because the rent, it's a tough industry because all the laws favor tenants, and a lot of people are scared of it.
So I think what's going to happen is there's actually going to be even more demand for rental properties as this year progresses and into next year. Why? There's a lot of people that, first of all, can't afford the prices of homes in the GTA and need to stay in the GTA. So, as an example, if you live in Mississauga or want to live in Mississauga and you work in Mississauga, you might not want to move to Guelph, as an example. Or you can't afford the $1.4 million average price in the neighborhood for a detached home, or don't want to afford the $1.4 million detached home in the neighborhood.
Or bought it this year and realize you can't afford it. So you need to now sell it and rent.
Yep. That happens too. But what's, my projection is now we're kind of in a state of this pandemic where things, normal is on the horizon, but it's not going to change how a lot of businesses operate. I think a lot of businesses are still going to be the work from home. You got that flexibility now. We're doing lots of virtual stuff. You see a lot of places close their retail locations or their office space, or they're downsizing. So, they had a 5,000 square foot office. Now they're in a 1,200 square foot office. I think we're going to see a lot of that. So I think people are going to continue to work. A lot of people are going to continue to work from home, which is going to create potentially the need of more space at home. And that usually means a bigger property. And if you can't afford it or don't want to afford it, you rent. So, and then additionally, you're going to have lots of immigration, right? Like the border is opening up again, travel.
Well,
flight.
I imagine there's a huge backlog of people anxiously waiting.
Well, and I think there's now, after the pandemic, certainly now, Canada leads for vaccinations, first vaccination globally, and probably won't be far behind for having people that are fully vaccinated. So when you're in certain countries and you see, hey, my country's only had 4% of the population fully vaccinated, and Canada's at 70%, and it's a beautiful country, and healthcare and great real estate, easy to find a job or easier to find a job, blah, 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 blah. There's going to be even a greater demand for moving to this country. And we need the tax money. We need to recover all of that money that the government spent over the last 2 years. So you don't think that they're going to open the doors and the floodgates are going to open up for people moving to Canada?
Well,
I do.
specifically with people like that too, like it's even more competitive for them to rent. And we had an inquiry recently about I can't remember which property it was, but somebody inquired recently and they said they're moving from the US to Canada and they were moving on the 15th of July. So at that point, it was maybe
request this morning. I got a request this morning. I sent it over to Steve Chiquetto to follow up on it on one of our properties in Oakville. $4,400 a month lease, and they are moving here from Barbados and need a place for the end of the month.
See, people like that, why on earth are they? I mean, these people, maybe they don't know because they're not from here. They don't know the market, but they need somebody working for them. Yeah. They're going to waste a lot of time.
For sure. And if they don't have the proper documents and can't convince a landlord, and you see, that's how multiple offers actually are happening right now in the lease world, is that you are getting people relocating or immigrating into the area, and they're putting offers until they get a place, right? Like they're now in a position where they just need a home. So it doesn't even have to meet all of their criteria. They just need to get a place by their deadline, and they're just throwing offers in. So as soon as you get those people throwing offers in, now you've got 2 or 3 of those kind of offers. And then you've got people that are generally in the market for that type of home and they like it and it's a new listing and blah, blah, blah. So they throw their offer in and now you're at 4 or 5 offers, and the listing agent will go back to those offers and say, okay, well, we got your application, we got all your documentation. You're up against 3 or 4 other offers for this place. Do you want to improve your offer to make it a little bit nicer? Right? That's what's happening. So now you're seeing a place that should have rented for $3,000 a month going for 31, 32, 35.
Well, this has been going on for a long time. When we rented our townhouse out the first time, which was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Something like that. It was in competition then. It's been a long time. So there was one we rented out in Oakville recently, and they were moving in from a different province, from Alberta. And they went about it the right way. I don't know how they connected with this particular agent, but they were working with a realtor that is coincidentally also works in our brokerage. And he did a great job for them from the perspective of finding them properties. He would go walk through virtually with them and do like a FaceTime call or something like that. And then he submitted all their documents, and he submitted, a nice application with all the appropriate supporting documents, and he got the deal. If they were just calling around randomly and having to sell their story to all the listing agents, it would just be monotonous and probably not come together nearly as quick.
So if you're a landlord or a tenant, or if you're a realtor, here's our advice. Here's my advice. You need to have a rental application. That's a standard form with the Ontario Real Estate Association, and fill it out completely. Don't leave any blanks, and don't lie. Correctly. Fill it out correctly. Don't lie. Put it all in there. Don't hide anything, because as a landlord or as a landlord representative, we can smell when something is fishy. So fill it out completely. Fill it out accurately. That's number 1, rental application. Number 2, Equifax report with score. Go on to equifax.ca, pay the $26, download the Equifax report with score, and save it as a PDF on your desktop. It can't be outdated. So if today is July 26th and the report is from May the 2nd, you probably want to spend that $26 again and get a new report. Because who knows what happens.
I'd be okay with that. A couple months, 2, 3 months.
Okay. Maybe I'm being a little bit picky, but let's say the report's from February. Is that better?
I'd still be somewhat okay with it.
I wouldn't. I don't know if you went out and you bought a $1,200 a month Mercedes Benz. So there's things to consider there. Anyways, thanks for ruining my shtick here.
So it makes this
number
fun.
2, have a proper Equifax report. Don't play around with that report.
Can we clarify there too? Because there are a lot of options out there.
That's true.
I find Equifax.
There's TransUnion.
And there's a lot of these new pop-up companies.
Credit Karma.
Yeah, Credit Karma, all these companies. I find Equifax is the most detailed report for unquestionably.
It's detailed. It's easy to read.
Yes.
Most of the lenders report to Equifax. The two biggest credit reporting agencies in the country are TransUnion and Equifax, right? So everything is going to get reported to one or the other or both.
And do not take screenshots with your phone. I hate when people do that. They pull up they just take 10 screenshots of the report on their phone and send all these images. It's terrible.
Yeah, no, it's really easy to download the report and you save it as a PDF and it's one file. Not separate pages, not screenshots, not photos. Download the damn PDF. If you don't know how to do it, call Equifax or reach out to your realtor. Your realtor probably knows how to do it, hopefully. But figure it out. Get the PDF in one document. So that's number 2. A credit report with score. Properly saved. No forgery, obviously. Number 3, most recent pay stubs. Right? You want to have a look as a landlord or the landlord's representative. You want to have a look at the most recent pay stubs, not only to, verify employment. That's a form of verification. One of the few ways you can do it, or one of the few ways that you should be using, but also to verify their income that they reported on that rental application. So if they said
that they're currently employed.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, they could have just got fired yesterday, but if you've got a pay stub from last week, it's a bit reassuring that their story is accurate and they're currently working.
Well, and how many times we've seen a rental application where somebody will say, I make $100,000 a year. We get the most recent pay stub. It's halfway through the year and they've made $35,000.
Right. Well, and there are cases where people
they've made $50,000, but $20,000 of it is in bonuses and commission that isn't guaranteed.
Well, that's different though. We're not a bank, so we don't have as strict rules and requirements as a bank would. So I think from that perspective, a bank won't take some sort of income into consideration, or they'll use a percentage of it, or an average of the previous couple of years.
You're right.
I think,
but it's all information.
It's
all information, right?
And, so if your pay is structured a lot like that, and you may not see a chunk of it until the end of the year, you should provide something from the previous year, like a T4 NOA, notice of assessment, to show how it's broken down.
Well, and don't hide anything, provide an explanation. Yeah. Right. So if you are serious, if you're a tenant and you're serious about getting the place and you've got all the paperwork together and you're a good tenant, you might want to write a little love story, a little love letter to the landlord that says why you would make a good tenant. And in there, just put an explanation. Say, hey, just as a heads up, my income has been consistent for whatever X amount of time. And in that income, it does include bonuses, which I'm expecting to get. So it doesn't show here in my pay stub. To go along with that, so that's number 3, most recent pay stubs, and provide 2 of them. So the back-to-back last 2 pay stubs. A job letter. So if you're out hunting for a lease, you're going to have to rent a property, get a job letter as soon as possible. It usually takes a few days for the human resources department or whoever's responsible for doing that. It usually takes them a bit to put that together for you. Get a job letter. Make sure it's on company letterhead. Make sure it states how long you've been employed there, what your position is, and how much you make, which is a standard job letter. But sometimes we get these ones from these small companies where especially when it comes to contractors. We see that a lot where there is no company letterhead and it's from Joe, owner of XYZ Electrical. And it says,
I mean,
Bob,
some people do work for companies like that too. Where you'd be like, I know people like where they're, if you ask for an invoice, you're not getting an invoice. Like it's just going to be handwritten on a piece of paper. But they're reputable.
Or it's one of those sales receipt things from the dollar store.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, that's not going to be accepted or what have you. But again, crossing the T's and dotting the I's as much as you can.
On the note of your letter,
this is for realtors as well. Like I'm giving advice here to everybody, and there's a bunch of realtors that listen, and they got to take note, because the better job that realtors do in general when it comes to leases, the less perception of that sleaziness or whatever, and the people that are shopping on their own that really need help, that should get proper help, maybe they get a little bit more confident if we can do a better job as an industry in that facet, in that.
Well, and when an offer is being presented on your behalf as a tenant by an agent who is presenting themselves very professionally, it is much better received than somebody who is difficult to deal with, who makes errors in the documentation. That raises red flags versus a good experience and immediately establishing confidence from the agent representing the landlord. And when you do that, the agent representing the landlord will convey to the landlord, hey, this person's been good to deal with so far. They seem to know what they're talking about. They seem to know their client very well. They seem very confident that they'd be a good fit, which is very different than me saying to a landlord, yeah, I had trouble getting a hold of them. They were missing some paperwork. I'm still trying to get it. Right? Like immediately it changes your perception of somebody. And the landlord may not even, at that point, they may have already made a decision. So even if a day or two later, the correct documents come in and corrections have been made, they've already lost. But I wanted to ask something. I wanted to ask you your opinion. You mentioned writing a letter, which I'm a big advocate of too, and even sending a nice family photo or something, or a personal photo, whatever. I think that can go a long way. But one time I had a good client, a gay couple of guys, and I asked them to write a letter, and they were hesitant to, because they thought it could have the opposite effect. And I hadn't ever really thought of that.
Because they're gay?
Because they're gay, yeah. And I suppose in some cases it could, but I mean, maybe I'm naive. I think, I think that, we're talking about a very small percentage, but people do have that concern.
Yeah.
Of being profiled or, for racial purposes or whatever.
Well, I saw on Facebook, and I think I mentioned it to you because it pissed me off, because now Facebook changed their ad policies where we cannot discriminate essentially in advertising. And I'll elaborate on that just so there's no misconception here. If we're advertising a property, we cannot. We used to be able to target certain demographics. So, as an example, if we wanted to place an ad for that property that's for sale and target females only from the age of 25 to 35 that live in postal code L9T1 and 4, we could do that. Now you cannot. It has to be a very generic ad to be advertised to everybody.
Well,
so
specifically,
some of our ads are going out to 17-year-olds or 18-year-olds.
18-year-olds, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
18-year-olds for $3 million property, right?
Right.
Not to say that there aren't any 18-year-olds that can afford a $3 million property, especially with TikTok and YouTube these days. But come on, really?
But generally speaking, you can get a general idea for who the likely demographic is going to be.
Right. If a family of 4 in their mid 30s isn't going to be interested in that home, or maybe it's a retired couple that's interested in the home.
Right.
Anyways, so I saw this ad in one of the groups that I belong to, and the ad was published by the landlord. So the owner that owns the home put an ad together, had some photos, some shit ass photos, and put a post on this Facebook group. And it said, single people only. That's the first thing it said. So no couples, no pets, single people only. I'm like, okay, well, that's not exactly
Doesn't abide by their advertising guidelines, but they're technically
right.
not buying an ad.
You mentioned one of the popular Facebook groups. In another popular Facebook group locally, there was a post about, I want to say, a year ago. And right in the advertisement of the property, so it's a property for rent, it says, prefer no Asians.
Really?
Prefer no Asians.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm telling you, off the record, but on the record, I'm sure it's happened.
Record.
But off the record, right? Just between me and you.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happened to you as well, where you have a certain ethnicity, certain ethnic person, and maybe they don't tell you specifically, or maybe they do. Both have happened to me where the landlord did not accept the offer because of the racial profiling that happened.
I've had landlords mention things along those lines. I don't know if it was definitive in making their decision, but definitely it's something that people take into consideration.
And, it's really sad. I feel bad for a lot of new immigrants, coming into this country. We try and, Canada is a very diverse population, extremely diverse. I think it's probably the most diverse population in the world. I don't have any stats to back that up, or I'm just pulling that one out of my ass, but I'm just going to guess. And if you think about people coming to this beautiful country for the first time and trying to find a home, and some of these people came from their home country as very professional people, doctors, lawyers. I had one client. I was just going to say, I had one client. He was an engineer. Actually, both him and his wife were engineers, and very clean, very polite, beautiful family. And we had an extremely difficult time finding them a property because they were new immigrants, because of their ethnicity. And it's a shame. But if, again, going back to those documents, rental application, job letter, most recent pay stub, credit report with score, that's where it all starts. Get those together, make sure they're looking good. But back to the matter is, rental market is hot, lots of multiple offers. It's not going to stop. It's not going to slow down. If you're thinking of investing and putting your money into somewhere where it can be safe long term, good opportunity right now. Super, super opportunity. Like if you can afford to buy a townhouse, a semi-detached, or a smaller detached home and put it on the rental market, you'll be doing okay.
Can you hear that herd of elephants?
Now, is that your family above you?
Yeah, they just came running downstairs.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Do they want to be on the podcast?
I don't imagine so, but I also don't think they know we're doing the podcast. But that's quite all right.
So do you? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say my advice in general on the topic of the competitiveness of the rental market is you definitely need somebody good working on your side. I think there's something to be said about also working with, I don't know if I would say a team necessarily, but an example would be there was a tenant that I knew that didn't have the easiest recent history and had financial difficulties, but they were working through them. And they were, after lengthy conversations with them, I was very comfortable with them as tenants. I would have not, after getting to know them, I wouldn't have hesitated to have them in one of my own properties. And they ended up working with us. At the time I introduced this person to one of our team members who was taking care of everything. And we had a property coming up within the team and it was a good fit. So before it even went to market, they were introduced to the landlords. The landlords were very happy with them. We sold them on these people and it worked out. We got them into a place. So I think when you're working with people and you really get to know them, kind of like more on like an intimate level, then you have that human connection versus if you're just calling all these agents that have listings up, they're just going to look at the numbers and facts. They're not going to give you that opportunity. So you need to build a relationship with somebody. The other things too is I think don't be naive. Like if your credit is just terrible, stop trying to find all these nice fancy houses. You got to start somewhere. The purpose-built rental buildings, those are probably easier to get into than somebody's primary residence, where it's their retirement fund, and they're going to be really picky about who's moving in.
What's your, aside from having all of because again, going back to the actual topic of this conversation, bidding wars on leases, if you were representing somebody right now and you knew the home that they're interested in is going to be really desirable, aside from having, and you knew that it was going to get into a potential bidding war, quote unquote, aside from having the proper documents that we talked about, those 4 documents, and having it all ready to go, do you have any other advice and tips for people that are potentially going to be in that situation?
I think depending on I think you really need to think seriously about your qualifications and how you as a tenant are being perceived by potential landlords, and things that might help to sell your case to somebody would be being open to making more than one payment up front. I know people that'll pay the whole year up front just to give peace of mind. There was a TikTok I saw.
By the way, I'm going to comment on that just real quick before you continue on with this tips, and then we're going to wrap it up in a couple of minutes here. Episode 141 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe and leave comments. We usually pick our topics from your comments. If you pay the whole year up front, now I'm putting my landlord hat on, that's great. That's super. $2,500 a month. You give me 30 grand up front. Awesome. I got 30 grand. I've guaranteed my rent for the next 12 months. What's to say you're going to pay in month 13, 14, 15, 16, etc.?
Well, that's right? 100%. So that is the question that will go through the landlord's mind. And some landlords aren't going to be sold by the idea.
And you know what else?
Many will.
If you're a realtor submitting an offer like that, and the reason I'm bringing this up because I had one recently, I'll give you the story. I got an offer. It was actually one. It may have been one with the fraudulent. It was one, the one I was speaking of earlier with the fake credit report. The realtor didn't give me a heads up that this offer was coming in and just submitted the offer. And the offer had, I can't remember, I think 6 payments paid up front. And I'm like, and it was the only offer. There was no other offers. but here's 6 payments paid up front.
I had this discussion with someone yesterday.
What? Why? That was my first question, because the first thing I look at is the offer.
Yeah.
And then I look at supporting documents. So I'm looking at the offer. It was for full asking price and 6 payments in advance. And the first thing that came to my mind was, why are you paying me 6 months in advance? And then I started thinking, here we go. Something's a little fishy here, or something's not right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the communication of that offer is super important for a realtor, and giving the landlord's realtor a heads up and saying, hey, got an offer coming into you, really nice couple, blah, blah, blah. We've got all the paperwork, blah, blah, blah. Super nice family. Here's some photos of the family and the current residents. Look how nice it looks. And we know that this place is going to go quickly. We don't want to be in competition. We've been looking for a home just like this, and they're willing to pay you full asking price. And if it helps them get the place, they'd be willing to provide you a little bit more security with 6 months in advance payments or whatever. You explain the damn thing. Don't just send it and say, here's 6 months in advance, because I'm going to go looking and say, well, your credit must be crap, or your job must be
something's
unstable.
off here. And I had that chat with someone yesterday who's he just wants to pay the whole year up front. And I said, that's great. Let's hold it in our back pocket and use it if we need to. But sending that initially could be a little bit concerning and raise red flags. Certainly,
now, if you're in a multiple offer situation,
different,
it's a different scenario. Then you're getting into, okay, let's pull out all the stops to try and win this lease. Can I give them more months in advance? Can I give them more money on the rent? What can I do here to solidify this deal that makes my offer look better than the other offers?
Well, there was a TikTok I saw a little while ago, someone in Ontario, I don't know exactly where, but this woman was complaining, just like really complaining, going off about how it's ridiculous. She can't find a rental, and people are asking for additional months deposits, and that's not acceptable, and da. And there's a few things that was interesting from that. One is her TikTok was a public profile, so you could go on and see everything. And she was quite often dressed very provocatively and ranting and complaining about stuff. And social media is being used as a tool to determine whether or not somebody is a qualified tenant. They're getting to know you through your social. So if you don't, if you're posting things that you think
that's a very good point
could be perceived in a negative manner, or put a negative picture of you to a potential landlord, stop posting for a while, shut your account down or put it private, whatever, because people are looking you up. And if they don't like what they're seeing, they're not going to hire you. If you're posting pictures of a 100-pound
if you got
dog,
a video on Insta or TikTok of you laying your fat ass down on the couch, smoking a blunt, eating a bag of Doritos at 3:00 in the morning while you got Tupac blaring in the background,
Tupac.
I love Tupac. I'm just saying, bass, the bass. Okay. You got some loud music.
Yeah.
I don't know. If I'm a landlord, I'm looking at that video going,
100%.
Oh, that's what you're going to be like as a tenant. So I'm going to have issues from my neighbors because you're playing loud music, smoking blunts at 3:00 in the morning. Okay. Well, this house ain't for you, friend.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing was she was complaining about, people there were people asking a lot of things. Some things were I would agree are not acceptable. Like they were asking.
I would have never been able to rent a property when I was in my teens.
Unfortunately, social media didn't exist.
Nobody would have accepted me.
People were asking her if she had been vaccinated. But that's not acceptable. Like, what the hell does that matter? Unless
That's
maybe
crazy.
it's a basement apartment, I can see why somebody might be concerned, perhaps.
Yeah, but are they legally allowed to?
No, for sure not. For sure not. But the point is, if it's a competitive market, what the fuck? Nobody's going to do what? You have no choice. Like,
Stop swearing. We're going to lose another listing.
If somebody is asking you, and she was complaining about people asking for additional months up front, no, technically they're not allowed to force you to do that. But if you don't agree to it, they're just not going to let you be a tenant. And if they are insisting on it, maybe there's something wrong with your application that's making them concerned, which is causing them to ask for it. So you need to reevaluate, the whole scenario and see, why are they asking for this? If it's because there are people out there willing to do it, it may not be allowed by the landlord tenant board, but it may be required to put a deal together.
So in this article that started this whole conversation and the topic of this podcast, there was a quote from somebody that was having difficulty renting a home. And the story goes basically that they lost in multiple offers on 6 or 7 homes. I'm sorry. And being represented by a realtor. If you lost out on 6 or 7 leases, don't blame it on the fact that the rental market is stupid hot or whatever. If you lost on 6 or 7 properties, something is wrong there. Either your paperwork, your credit, your job, you, or your realtor. Something's wrong. There's no way in hell you should ever lose out on 6 or 7 properties in a row on a lease. No.
Another thing she was saying, I think she had a dog and people wouldn't accept her as a tenant because of the dog. And she's like, that's illegal. You can't do that. It's interesting because I read on the landlord tenant board website, it's obviously you cannot prevent somebody from having a dog in a rental property. And if you have a no pet clause in the offer, that clause is null and void. But it did specifically say that they can be biased against that if they know that going into reviewing the application. If they know you have a dog or a pet, they can consciously say, well, I don't want this person coming in as a tenant because of the dog. And they're allowed to do that. So
I have never not got my tenants a property because of a pet.
Rare. Yeah.
Very, very rare. Very rare. As a landlord, I'm open to any domestic pets, but I'm highly allergic to cats. Would I prefer if we had a tenant that didn't have a cat? Sure. But our past tenant had 2 of these furry monsters that just clogged up my sinuses for days after, and the house is carpeted.
Yeah.
What, are you going to tell me a story?
I was standing in the kitchen with them before we accepted their offer, and they specifically said they had no pets.
That's why I brought it up.
Because which I wouldn't have cared.
I wouldn't have cared
me off
either.
That they lied.
100%. And I still would have. Here's the difference. I still would have accepted them as a tenant.
Yeah.
They were a bit of a pain in the ass, but they were still good tenants, like very high maintenance in terms of questions and emails and phone calls and all that. Fine, whatever. You pay us. You're allowed to do that. But the fact that you moved 2 cats in there and that I'm highly allergic and that the home is carpeted, and knowing that a lot of people are allergic to cats, especially, those cats were certainly fluffy.
Seems like a funny thing to say.
I probably would have asked them for a couple $100.
Yeah.
And
just to do carpet cleaning, or we did carpet cleaning and clean the ducts. I think
we did that for them when they moved in.
And for the next person because it was so bad.
Yes. So I would have asked them for a little bit of money to compensate for that because of the cats. That's
Absolutely.
all.
Yeah.
That would have been the courteous thing to do from their perspective.
But then this lady would have been like, oh, you can't ask for that. You can only ask for a security deposit, which is last month's rent, and a key deposit, if at a suitable amount to replace the keys.
Well, that's fine. Then I would have said, okay, well, instead of $2,700 a month, you just pay us $2,750 and we'll call it even.
Right. People don't know how it works.
There's more than one way to skin a cat.
Especially
as
a
my
fluffy cat.
grandfather would say. Episode 141, KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Thank you for listening. Send your comments in, and we will use your topics in future episodes. That's it for today.